Then I will go ahead and call this Central Business District Committee meeting to order. So I'll start with item A, facade grant program discussion. So I guess anything I know you guys have done some work. Do you want to just provide like an overview or highlight some of the things that you've been working on since we last met?
Yeah, we've been working on a lot.
I can see that.
So we broke it down into two areas, one being metrics, review, and goals. It was really important to us that based off of the conversation that we had the last meeting, that any changes or conversations we were going to have be based off of facts, not feelings. And we wanted to make sure that we understood the metrics so that we could make the best decisions moving forward. So Daria has a little recap kind of what we've looked at and how it's influenced some of the suggestions that we have later on.
So if you look at the big, like, larger printout sheet, just kind of going through some of the information there. So we pulled all of our awardees over the first 4 cycles. I've added in the 5th cycle, but obviously we can't really use a lot of that information yet because they haven't used their grants yet. So there's little sections in here that say TBD just because we don't know how this past cycle is going to impact our numbers yet. So within the first 4 cycles, that is 78,000 total awarded dollars. And there were some numbers, data, and questions and concerns that kind of came up in the last work session that we wanted to address on kind of what those stats are and how we calculated them. So of the 78,000 grant dollars awarded, there were $41,000 that were grants that were utilized either in full or in part. So the numbers get really skewed when you look at the actual dollars drawn, just because they, for whatever reason, whether it was the project changed or they came in under budget or something else happened, they completed the project but didn't utilize the full grant funds. Looking at all the funds used, only 8% didn't get used. So that's actually really good. We thought that 92% of grants that were used either in full or in part were used. So of all of the grants awarded, 53% of grant funds were either used or partially used, which, considering our last grant cycle, the 4th round had 0 use and kind of fell through. That heavily impacted those numbers. So 53 with a cycle that didn't really happen, I think is also pretty great. And as we get more years and more numbers, that number will fluctuate a lot less. It's very unstable now. I was kind of looking to see what would happen if the 5th round, if everyone used the grant money, we'd be at like 65% completion. If no one used the grant money, we'd be down at like 44% completion. So a single year can really impact that number. So as we obviously will want a positive trend, but we'll need a lot more years of having the facade grant to really see that number stabilize and have a pattern. Of the grants that were used or partially used, 36% of those grants were partially used. So of the total grants that were accessed, 36% of those grants were only used in partial, whether again due to coming under budget or slight changes to the project towards completion. 47% of grants that were awarded were not used at all, either in part or at all. So that's kind of what all of those numbers are. I'm hoping to kind of abate some of the concerns that came up in the last meeting. Down on the bottom left, we put together the number of applications, the number of qualifying applications that came in each round. And looking at the number of applications, it's really tempting to see a weird pattern there of like 13, 5, 13, 4. Because we haven't had many grant cycles, I wouldn't say it's a pattern of community concern or community trends, just because there could be so many things, like we had a change in what buildings could apply. We had a change in who within Christiansburg could apply. There could be changes in staffing, changes in town involvement. So there's just way too many other variables to say, oh, there's a community trend that they wanted every other year. There's just way too many other things that could go into those numbers. The 13 is just a very happy coincidence that we had 13 applicants in those 3 years. But of all applications we've had, 71% of those applications have been qualifying ones. Reasons why applications haven't qualified in the past is mostly because the work was done before they applied. They did the work and was like, ooh, this sounds great, and then came, applied, and didn't realize they weren't eligible. We've had some nonprofits apply that weren't eligible. We've had applications for not street-facing work, so like rears or side of buildings that weren't street-facing. And then we've had some non-applicable work proposed, such as signage, that we just don't cover with the grant. I have been able to talk with a couple of past awardees that were not able to complete their projects. Not all of them, but a couple people gave me their thoughts and barriers. So one of the biggest things was the time constraint, that the proposed project they had just, they couldn't get completed by the time that the grant cycle ended. That was due to either labor delays or that it was such a large project, that just running into, once you open something up, you never know what you'll find. So having to work with surveyors or engineers and then find people that can actually do the work. And it just gets put off and put off, especially in the colder months. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to get consistent work around the holidays. So mostly it was time constraints. In some instances, other investments took priority. For some awardees, it was an investment in that same property, where instead of working on the facade, they ended up working up inside the building or in the rear of the building and investing in that same project, just not where they could be reimbursed by facade money. And then for some other awardees, they ended up taking more interest in other projects, other buildings entirely, and just didn't make the grant award project a priority at that time. That is kind of a general overview of all the information here. And let me know if you have any questions.
That's excellent.
Yeah, no problem.
Any questions? Any questions? That is so crazy, though, the number of applications and how they fluctuate.
Yeah,
That's such a
it's
weird.
so tempting to make a pattern of that, but we've had so many few grant cycles that it's hard to say that it's conclusively a community response rather than other factors affecting it.
Yeah, and we've done things a little differently each year, so like last year seems like that was a success with the number of people that applied. So anyway, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, great.
I wonder if the pandemic actually had some, at least looking at 21 and 22, I don't know. 21 was what was that, a down year, right?
Mhm. Yeah, 5
And then you see that, you
applications.
saw that kick back up to 22, and I just wonder how much.
So the next portion of this program review and changes, staff proactively after our last meeting held a kind of working meeting to discuss, how we could take the suggestions and put it into effect and bring, not necessarily a proposal, but just an idea of what it might look like moving forward if that's the direction that, the committee and council decide to go. So Tanya also sent us a document. We kind of piggybacked on that a little bit, and just worked through all of the questions, in that. So what I thought we could do is just sort of take a look at this, what changes we had suggested, and then we have a couple of questions at how you all might see best fit to move. I'm gonna pull this up so anyone watching the live stream or the video playback can see. Okay, so as far as the proposed mission statement, the facade grant program aims to help business owners, nonprofit organizations, and mixed-use and commercial property owners to improve their building facades and encourage investment in our business areas. The program prioritizes properties in our downtown and Cambria areas. It is designed to enhance the streetscape, strengthen partnerships with stakeholders, and encourage revitalization of older buildings. So this kind of takes our previous mission statement, adds in nonprofit organizations, which it seemed like at our last meeting was the direction that the committee might see fit to go. But then also recognizes that downtown and Cambria and our older buildings are somewhat of a priority, and we'll get into how we can judge the applications based on that when we get into the rubric. So as far as eligibility, one question that we had was if we wanted to stick to locally owned, or we wanted to include locally owned chains, and do we want to include this as a scoring criteria? Or do we want to give all businesses the opportunity, but preference to locally owned or locally franchised. Okay.
Question. I think you can separate the difference, let's say like a restaurant between indoor dining and outdoor dining. Maybe by like number of seats or something like that, but simply like ownership or whether it's a franchise or not. I think that'd probably be
So with our current,
questionable.
with the current way that we have it, even our bigger restaurants could technically apply for it.
If they're eligible.
Okay.
Criteria as far as age,
Okay,
I would say that they could,
okay. So is that something, I guess,
but none of them are probably gonna meet the age requirements either. It's
Yeah.
like 50 years for structure.
but we had talked about eliminating the age restriction.
Or at least scoring at a higher.
Yes, and we have, that's how we have it in the rubric is, yeah.
There are quite a few localities that do say that small businesses qualify with that packet that I gave. There was designated areas, and then they were also targeting small business, that were not chains or franchises, so,
Maybe it carries a different weight. I think we had discussed, like, if you are a small business, then there's a priority or a different weight to that within the rubric versus if you are a full on, like,
But you're saying legally we can't, there'd be no grounds to bar a larger business.
The chain versus a privately owned local restaurant, I think it would be hard to, differentiate legally verbiage that, right, because why are you separating the difference other than simply ownership?
Sure.
You know?
But if they were a certified small business, then maybe.
Then they would
give some extra.
they would-
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at, that
Yeah.
if there's criteria, like number of seats or indoor dining versus seats to go,
Right.
or, some, maybe if it's a sort of a small business,
Right, yeah.
like I say, to me, it probably needs to be tied to some other criteria than just ownership or versus, local versus chain.
Right. So they can just be ranked higher.
so would y'all like us to look into that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess for me, I think about, the purpose of the facade grant program, it's improving the look of these areas so that people want to come to the businesses and businesses want to be in the areas. And so regardless of who owns it, it all affects the look and feel of the town. Not saying like my priority isn't large businesses or chains, I guess I should say, but like, would that have disqualified Subway, who was in an old building in our downtown? You know what I mean? Which I think it's very fair for them to apply because they're locally owned and operated. You know what I mean? So, I look at all the businesses and I think I want like all of these older buildings to be improved, those older areas be improved.
Yeah.
And some of that, it matters a little bit because I guess if you're saying, oh, well, the corporation is investing money into the look and feel of the business, that's great. I don't know, I guess I don't see that as an issue, although I would like to consider scoring them with extra points, I guess, in the rubric if they are certified small business. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm articulating.
And I just think that, we can't go wrong as long as we have a scorecard that justifies, what we're looking at. So the eligibility can be across the board as long, and then we can look at those that are, smaller owned businesses, within these areas that we can,
We really need the help.
yeah, we can then key in on,
Mhm.
exactly. So,
And then we just need to, if you're a certified small business, then perhaps you just get maybe 5 extra points or something in the rubric. But then if you're not a locally, small certified small business, you write a great application, you still can have a strong chance at receiving a grant. It's just, if it comes down to it, we would choose somebody locally owned or Virginia.
Sure,
because the nature of the building still matters,
right.
not just the occupant side of it.
Right.
So,
Okay, so we'll look into that just to bring an update and see what it might look like to award some points within the rubric and adjust that, right?
Mhm.
Okay, Eligible expenses, these are two changes to how it had been previously based on our last meeting. Murals and or facade paintings would be allowed only as approved by the committee. And then landscaping and hardscaping will not be considered as a standalone project, but may be considered in conjunction with other approved facade work.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
I like it. I really would love for us to incorporate some murals, painting, like, I mean, I think that these are a good and interesting things that would bring a lot of interest to the community, honestly. So I would love to see us do more of that. And I think that's an opportunity for us to partner with I don't know what it's called. The Arts Advisory Board, is that?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was gonna say.
Public Arts Advisory
Yeah,
Board.
I was like, where does that? I'm all for the partnership. I'm just thinking, what is the Arts Advisory Board then versus this?
Hmm.
If murals are eligible in
Mhm.
the facade grant,
Yeah.
right? And I think as long as we can have clear distinction as what each of those groups are
Mhm.
addressing. I could just, that I could see be a point of confusion for the public or member, committee members if we're not explicitly saying what each of those two committees are addressing.
And I would definitely want their voice on the committee. Too.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
okay, great. Could be any- I don't know that I'm the right person to be like perfect mural, but I think that group does have the right people to say, yes, this is the right mural for the feel of our downtown. And, in conjunction with us awarding the grant, so.
And Paula Alston, who was also on the board, she was part of the selection committee this past round.
Perfect.
So maybe we can revisit this wording and discuss what it might look like in partnership or what the relationship would look like with the arts board, unless you all feel like you have clear thoughts now on what you'd like to see.
I mean, if there's something that we can do to include them to provide a timely review, and maybe we need to define what a timely review is, but if we're receiving these applications, we're scoring them and someone's doing very well, it's just the concept of the art needs to, I think, be reviewed by that board, and they need to review it quickly so that we're not delaying that ability to grant the awards. So you know what I mean? Like if we review those, and then it's built into the process that if there's art to review, that it goes to that board, then a couple of weeks.
yeah, my only question there would be, that committee obviously is working with local artists, and where do we distinguish local artists from the other local businesses or other entities that would be applying for this? And, can they all be one and the same, or are we going to look at artists in a different way with the Arts Advisory Board? Then, well, as in like, can the artists then be the applicant themselves? Guess is where I'm a little,
Like if they have a business.
Yeah, well, or if they're themselves a sole proprietor, right? They don't operate in that building, but I'm not sure I know the answer. I'm just sort of thinking, how do we make sure that we're just clear on, what that actually looks like, a business, an entity, an organization versus an individual artist being a sole proprietor.
Really? Okay.
I think it would run through because of the ownership or the occupation from a business inside of that building. Then it would be them having to contract whomever out and, submit the mural based on that.
You need to do the.
To do the work.
Yeah, right,
So
yeah,
we in turn would pay the applicant
Mhm.
because they would pay the
Right.
artist and then they would bring us
The other thing we
in.
could, the other thing we could do to eliminate confusion is scratch the murals part of it, because I think the point of this bullet was if somebody was just doing a paint job,
right,
that's what we were trying to
Gotcha.
necessarily avoid. But we didn't want to exclude part of that paint job, like if somebody wanted to put artwork on. it.
right.
I think, so maybe adding murals to this line item adds to confusion.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe we don't want to say that it's not a qualifying thing if this committee
Right.
says it's part of the overall facade work and they want to put a mural on it, that's great, we can include that as part of the funding, but get your point too, I don't want to confuse it with the other.
Right.
So you change the verbiage to just decorative facade painting?
That's nice.
But I also see there could be a key distinction of like, I'm just trying to think of an example, one's not coming to mind. But, you know, preserving an old mural on a building, right, pre-existing,
Yeah.
right, rather than an artist who's gonna come and create something new on the brick and wall, so, or the brick and mortar, so. Right, that becomes that very different in terms of what,
Yeah.
are we preserving something, exactly,
Love to get a grant for it, but something like he did with the Darling Service Motor Company, getting the,
there's a good example,
the
yeah,
old signage back and
Right.
on it under the paint over. the
right,
top of it.
right. So as long as we're kind of clear on what those lines look like in terms of the purview of the two committees, just so that we don't, there's not members of the public that get confused as about what each scope looks like.
I think if we're just clear, I mean, the eligibility to apply for the grant still stands. You have to be the person who can make the decision about the building. And if you decide, whoever you contract with, regardless if it's an artist or, you know, a builder, whomever, I mean, that's up to you. You're telling us the project you want to do and the concept drawings are, you know, you're providing those things. But then who you hire and how you pay for it is on you.
And with the Public Arts Board, the funding for that is very specific in what we're able to utilize that on. So if we broadcast that specific information like in detail, then that maybe would cover it, I think.
But that's also another good point, is that the funding, there's a different source of funding that we have at least used previously, like for the Cambria mural and other mini projects, right? That doesn't come out of,
There's a fund that we had from a donation from, two private families that we received $100,000. That's what we paid for the Cambrian.
Right.
Mural. We basically have that still in reserves. It's actually a little over 100,000 and they paid for that mural because of interest on the
Okay.
account.
And they were specific in what they
Yeah,
wanted.
more specific, that it had to be used only for art projects, and they stated a preference to use it for larger art projects that they could. We did run the Cambria mural by them, just kind of, they're okay, and then go with that. I mentioned the possibility of maybe doing, like a statue either in the circle out in front of the post office, or maybe to the side there.
Hmm.
You know, I think they were okay with that, but you know, whatever, if I have a large project, as long as they're allowed, I'm still gonna take it back and
right,
and let it buy. I
Yeah.
mean, there's only one person from the donation still alive.
anyways, maybe just clarity on that is what we're, you know, maybe it's that word mural, you know?
Yeah. And what did you say? What did you? Decorative.
Yeah, decorative on the side painting.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
windows are open.
In
Left
your
my
car,
windows down yet.
You wanna run and,
you need to go.
yeah.
It's raining really hard. It's hard.
I didn't know if that was considered what.
It is.
Honestly, it's too late now.
It's too late.
It's so
Yeah.
low.
I mean, you might open your door and water
Take
might.
like a trash.
It's really.
Oh.
My car.
I looked at the
If it
window,
helps,
there's
it will
nothing
last.
there. Okay.
I just thought that the AC was really loud.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll revisit, the mural, we'll revisit that first eligible expense and see if we can't reword a little bit,
So one of the things, if you're going to consider a mural on a particular building and they want to do this, then part of that facade grant could be used to paint building to get in preparation for a mural. Is that correct?
I
That
mean, I
mural?
think that's fair.
I mean,
It depends on the verbiage we use for because we did have in there that they can't receive funding in another form from the town, right?
yeah, if they've received other, grants from the town.
Yeah.
So they couldn't apply for community support and this.
It'll depend on if.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, application clarification. So facade would be defined as the primary exterior face of a building that is visible from the public right of way. Typically, this refers to the outermost wall facing the main street and containing the primary public entrance. At the discretion of the town and selection committee, additional public facing walls may also be considered part of the facade.
I like that especially because if people are planning to, well, number one, if they improve their facade, you can see the side of their building, it's good to improve the side. But especially if they're gonna paint something, I imagine a lot of businesses who are eligible would put it on the side. So as long as that's viewable,
Sure.
visible from the main street, I think that makes sense.
If we include nonprofits, if a nonprofit receives other budgeted town contributions, they are not eligible. Clarifying language, the facade grant program includes businesses throughout the town of Christiansburg. However, priority will be given to qualifying downtown and Cambria properties. Total anticipated exterior investment by property owner or applicant. Completed checklist would be required with the application. And with the checklist, application, which includes budget breakdown, sketch, project schedule. So do we want to require everyone to submit a sketch? What does this process look like? Do we want to stick with the sketch person that we had, although it wasn't utilized last year, and go that route so that all of the sketches look the same? Do we want to say submit your own sketch? Do we want to set parameters around what that sketch looks like? How do we?
That is tough for me personally, because I think we definitely need a sketch to get an idea of what they're wanting to improve. But to say, I mean, I was confused about how that worked in the past, where we were paying $500 for these sketches, or we were just, I mean, if I was to apply for something and then I needed a sketch and that person did the sketch and I got $500 left in my grant, then that grant is supposed to be something I match. But I guess they never needed to match the cost for that sketch. And then what if they weren't awarded? Then was the cost of that sketch just an expense of the committee? So I feel like they need to figure that out. But I think we can provide resources. I don't know that it should come from the future grant in case they're not awarded and because they don't match that cost. Does that?
So do we want to develop some parameters around what we want to see in the sketch? And then it's up to the applicant to figure out how they want to display that. So we want to see colors and we want to see whatever else it is that the committee decides, so that they, I mean, because I feel like if there aren't any guidelines, if we just say submit a sketch, we're gonna get.
You're gonna get all over the place. Yeah.
I know this is really hard because I know that's tough to, like, that's a tough thing for them, just not just a business to just do. I don't want it to be a barrier, but I haven't figured out. I haven't figured out when they do that.
Do you remember if any of the other localities had sketch requirements?
It was dependent upon what the person or business was proposing to do, which is also what we had with our grant. So the criteria with the little asterisk, those were the ones that required a sketch. They could submit it themselves or have the artist, I guess, from here do that. But not everything required that, so I don't know if that's something that you want to kind of review and see what you want to require that, as far as what we're using as the metrics or.
One of the things that I liked when we first got into this, that we were using the lady out of Salem. And I remember, I believe it was electric supply, which is probably one of the first ones we did. You know, she had a great picture, but she also had, you know, the paint samples, the color samples that would look best with that. And it was up to the owner to choose, and it's the same if we do that and we allow someone to do their own sketch. I mean, I think we should have not just, we're gonna paint it gray, but we need to know the color scheme that they want to go with. So
Maybe-
is this an
You're
opportunity?
right, because ideally, they've got these projects in the pipeline. And they've got an idea what they're gonna do, and they're gonna proceed whether they get this grant or not, and that's ideal. Because, I mean, if they're doing $25,000 worth of work, this will help offset the cost, but they're gonna do it anyway.
Right, yeah.
And maybe this is something that in the workshop, you know, we talk them through how to provide. Maybe it's something that's a budget of the committee, like a portion of our budget, we just go, this is for sketches. You come to the workshop and you need to request a sketch, like, you have this limited amount of funds. And, you know, this first game, I mean, we were, I guess, kind of doing that anyway, so.
I guess maybe part of the reasoning with doing it before is so there was just, it's kind of like, you just eat the money because at least there's one consistent, you know, sketch to be able to judge on.
Yeah,
That's also why the past awards were only 4,500 though, because they figured that money into the rest. So do you want it to still be 5,000 or do you want it to accommodate artist costs?
Because if you need a sketch, I mean, I realize this, well, on the application, it looked like it went up to 4,500. I think, but we were willing to give people 5,000 if they didn't need the sketch.
Or if they did it themselves.
They did it, or if they did it themselves.
Biggest professional sketch.
Get 13 applicants and you're paying $500 a sketch, that's another $600. So it's just adding.
I wouldn't expect them to match it if they haven't been awarded the grant. Like, wouldn't go back to them and be like, no, please. I mean, maybe that is just the right way to go. If you need a sketch, then you'll just know that we want to be awarded.
Actually, it's still bringing their sketch cost into a qualified match. They're willing to put $300-$400 into the sketch, so that would qualify. That might encourage them to.
Outsource it, but then we get, well, which is fine, I guess, to get different types of sketches to compare against.
But I mean, we could still, but they could still use 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever.
Is that how much it costs us for the sketches? Is fine.
300 to 500 is probably normal, it depends how much, you know, if the artists do, they charge different range, but generally 300 to 500, I'd say.
He's like, he'll stay.
that was Robin Boutique, right? I just said, wrong.
That's,
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm changing my mind. Maybe that is the right way to go. Maybe it's the grant's up to $5,000. If you need a sketch, then just know you'll be eligible for 4,500, but we will handle the sketch for you.
It seemed to work okay. The previous system working as well.
We just need to make that clear in our application.
Agreed, yeah. The other thing actually, I would just clarify too. Under the nonprofits not being able to, I would make sure it says if a nonprofit receives other budgeted town contributions in the same fiscal year. Just so it's understood that we're not
Yeah.
talking about just if they've ever received town support,
Ever.
but rather if it's in the same fiscal year that we are budgeting for the facade grant, then it can't be.
We
it can't be a double
just
dip.
didn't want it to appear like they were double dipping. Like
Right.
the town's giving their money and then they're
Exactly.
giving our money back to us so we can give them. more.
Exactly, so.
We didn't want that.
But it's all assessed on one cycle, right? So I think as long as it's clear that as long as it's not in the same fiscal year.
Are you for cleaning up some of that? Well, I know we're gonna do some work on the application, but just making it clear on the application, it's a $5,000 grant. However, these things need a sketch. If you need us to provide the sketch, you're eligible for it. Yeah, I call it a day.
I think that's good.
All right, so what we've been doing. So ignore or my.
We can just see how that, I mean, I think we can see how that goes and, you know.
I don't have a problem. I mean, I can't think of a better way.
And we can get feedback after this next round, we can get some more feedback on that process, and if we tweak it going forward, we can.
Right.
Let's start with something and
Yeah.
Right.
keep the ball moving.
Right.
So that is gonna be like, just as a matter of fact, that if you need to sketch, then it's gonna be 4,500.
Mhm.
So we'll change that. That's what, we weren't having it across the board. Well, I guess in any previous year, definitely not this year because we didn't do the artist, but They were allowed to submit their own if they did something, so like, for example, um, what used to be Charlie's Chinese, or McAdoo's, we submitted something that was more of a architectural overlay, rather than an artist rendering because of what he was proposing. So, not to make it more complicated, but are we going to allow something like that if someone is needing to do something that's more architecturally detailed?
I mean, I think maybe it's a line item on the application where I don't need a sketch for this. I'm gonna ask the town to do a sketch. I'm gonna provide my own rendering. And then we just know if they provide their own or they don't need one, they're eligible for the 5,000.
Yeah.
If we do these sketches, it may, it could encourage some of the business owners to maybe go to the high school, some of the art students to get that as a project done.
Mentioned on the workshop.
So-
Like, here's ways you can get it done if you don't want us to do it.
Have a lot of talented students.
We do.
Well, and I think that's why we set criteria.
Yeah. We'll just see a little, on that note, just make sure that when they're gonna write down a sketch, that we make it clear, we would like to see the color, needs to.
The other thing you mentioned, dropping it from 5,000 to 4,500, you need a sketch. I think we need to make sure they understand that their part of the match is still for the full 5,000. It's just the town's contribution, it's coming out.
Right.
Is that what we did before? That they pay back? the
Because if we're only giving them
250?
4,500, are they matching 4,500? Essentially,
I
we're
would
just giving
assume
them,
it would be 5, yeah, I mean, I could look.
and maybe that's how you word it, the cost of the sketch would come out of town. So,
So like they would contribute whatever the cost of the sketch was, half of that?
well, if it would still be a $5,000 grant, but that they would have to match, but instead of the town giving 5,000, we would subtract whatever our cost was for that sketch.
What if the sketch is only 300?
Well, and that's my point, when you go to the 4,500 versus 5,000, if it only costs 300 for the sketch, then technically we could still give them the sketch plus the additional 47.
So maybe phrase it, if you need a sketch, then the sketch cost would come out of the grant money awarded.
That's kind of where I was trying to.
Then maybe we don't
Actually,
even,
I feel like it's adding confusion, because if you tell them 4,500, I think, well, actually.
yeah, so maybe we just,
And I get a free sketch.
yes,
So-
right. So maybe we say, all right, it's a $5,000 grant. If you need a sketch, we'll provide it, but if you are awarded, then portion of the, like half the sketch is something that you give back. In a way better word than I just said.
We'll clarify.
If they're not awarded, I don't think we worry about.
Right,
that,
right.
Because I don't need to go back and be like, give us half of something you didn't. So
That's right.
I'm down for that. And then we don't mention 4,100, we just say, we'll let you know the cost of the sketch. And then do we give them the sketch to keep? And so it becomes theirs.
We keep them.
Okay.
Or we have in the past. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Judging process, we'll skip that for now and come back to it, so we can get into more in detail. So this is the tentative timeline. We're kind of skipping to the end with this one, but we have two options here for what it could look like if the committee and council decide to move forward with the facade grant program for this year. The first one is a little bit of an expedited process. So we would begin marketing immediately, and we would have a workshop at the end of March. We would have another workshop at the end of April and another workshop at the end of May. At the workshop at the end of May, we would have pre-approval for the checklist, so applicants could bring their checklist in, and Miles would sit down with them and go through and make sure that everything looks good, that they're able to submit their application in its entirety with everything checked off. Facade grant applications would be due June 30th, and then we would award August 1st. The deadline to use would be June 30th. This would give more time for projects to be completed. And Within option two, it's essentially the same with the exception of we would not start this year. We would start January 1 to have longer to market and be able to do our workshop earlier and let's see. And then the award date would begin directly at the start of the fiscal year. So option one would be a little more expedited. We would have a little less time marketing. There would be a month less for allotted amount of time to do the work, but it would still be longer than what they traditionally have. Really kind of just what you all think and council would want to see. Good question.
Option two is essentially what we would score. Schedule. Option one is only if you want to do it.
My initial reaction is that we've got some momentum here since we got the 13 applications last year. I'd love to see us help build on that momentum. But I don't want to rush. Yeah.
Yeah, I want like a option 1.5. Timeline of the middle.
Well, I think we can still get a minimum of 2 grant workshops if we do it this year. I mean, pushing it into March might be a little soon, but I think we could get one in April and May. And we could push everything back another month, you know, to where it would be, the applications were due July 30th. The grant was awarded September 1st, and the deadline to use it is still the end of this year. The goal is to wrap up in the end of this.
Right.
Yeah.
Can we move forward with the rest of the discussion and then revisit this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wait, one quick question though. Is there a difference between workshop number 1 and workshop number 2?
No, we were thinking that all 3 of the workshops would really just be workshop basics. So if you can't make it to 1, then you can come to 2, and if you can't make it to 2, you can come to 3, but 3 would also include pre-approval for the checklist so that you're ready to go. So a couple notes about the workshops. What is a successful application, execution of work, budget preparations, fundraising to prepare for matching portion of the grant, maybe a guest speaker for each workshop from a past awardee, and one of the 3 workshops would be mandatory. Okay, we'll come back to that. So grant award, post-award workshop to discuss reimbursement process in detail. So the idea is that if you're awarded the grant, then we would have a workshop or a meeting where you would come in and we would go through all the details of what it looks like. The hope would be that this would eliminate some of the confusion for what can I use my money for? Can I use my money for past projects? And we're going to work to get that information out ahead of time in our marketing, but just another step to help make sure that everyone is on board with what expectations are. Yes. Thanks. An agreement to be signed by the town and the awardee. That just adds an extra level of commitment that we are agreeing to award you this money and you are agreeing to stick to a proposed timeline and a proposed schedule, which you'll see in the next bullet. So finalize and sign a project schedule within 30 days of grant award with the Small Business Solutions Manager. So the idea of this is that things happen, things come up, we understand that, but sort of an extra level of commitment to and accountability to having a schedule and then to having someone who is going to do a few regular check-ins to see, are you running into any obstacles? How can we help you with this? Are there any updates that Miles can bring back to the committee to let them know, you know, this awardee is struggling in this area, isn't sure if they're going to be, and the committee can decide how to move forward. Yeah. 6-month virtual check-in with Small Business Solutions Manager to ensure schedule is on track. So that would just be a midway point, but then also obviously always available if they have any calls, and we would encourage that relationship to be very open. And,
Right. Is that, do you think that's too
Too late.
long?
Do what?
I mean, is that
Too late in
too
the
much
game?
time going by and 6 months later, we realize
Yeah,
they're not going up the right tree at all? You know, like, or should it be looked more at a quarterly standpoint? I'm just thinking just so they don't get too far along and they realize they're not going at all in the right
Well,
direction.
I think one of the things we talked about was depending on when they had their project scheduled.
Right.
Maybe they're not starting for 6 or 7.
So that's fair, yeah.
But
Yeah.
at the same time, a quarterly check-in, hey, are your plans still on track?
Right, right.
Well, it's probably.
Yeah,
And maybe we ask them to build it into their project schedule. Just say at around, at, you know, we want to have a touch point with you about midway through the project cycle, but you build it in knowing like when your project's gonna start.
Sure, yeah, that's good. I think that's helpful. Because that's another thing we kind of discussed too, is we want us to be a resource, but also they're responsible for making sure the project progresses. We're here to help along the way, and we don't want them to feel forgotten, and we wanna, help make sure that they have everything that they need, but I'll keep them on track, if they can't keep themselves on track. If projects are not completed by deadline, applicant will be ineligible to apply for any grant assistance from the town for the following 2 years. So that's pretty self-explanatory. If projects are not completed by the deadline, the town retains the right to terminate agreement as determined by the Central Business District Committee. So what this would mean is that if we get to 6 months in and they haven't done anything, they don't have any plans to do anything, then the committee would be able to say, you're not meeting the agreement and we're going to eliminate our agreement together. We wanted to see how you all felt about that. If that sounds like reasonable, fair, appropriate, inappropriate.
It's fine. I mean, it doesn't mean we have to do it. It also, well, what would be the benefit of us terminating it?
I think this came out of you all expressing in the last meeting that there were concerns that people would get the award, but then not do anything with it. And we just continue to allow them, and that might knock other people out who are more willing to.
Yeah.
So what are the repercussions for, do we continue allowing them, or is there something that happens? And this may not be the answer. Either of these 2 points may not be the answer.
I think the previous bullet point is the answer. Like, I guess, I mean, terminating the agreement. Seems like a little, I'm not against it, but it seems like extra work. If at the end, they don't do the work, they're not eligible for 2 years.
Sure.
If we terminate the agreement, the same thing happens, right? Like, there's no
Yeah, if we terminate the agreement, it's not like we're taking their agreement. And bringing somebody else.
Right.
Same.
Right, that's why I was wondering if we were gonna, because we won't shift that money. So it's not like it's holding that money from somebody else in the meantime. So, and I don't want people to feel
Yeah,
like we're aggressively,
sure.
well, but I mean, we're holding them accountable, but not, it doesn't have to be like, you're not getting this done in time, we're gonna terminate the agreement. Where if they just got behind and they're like, look, we had to push the timeline, then that's fine. You're not at any, like, you're not at risk of us just terminating the agreement because it's all behind. You know what I'm saying? So maybe we
So
just
we'll
cut that
eliminate that,
and that other bullet is good to go.
Any delays or issues in execution should be reported to Small Business Solutions Manager immediately. And then we would include a post-award survey.
And we could always consider if they really had something pop up, they're like, look, huge, like we gotta run these pipes, we gotta do something that was major, that was totally unanticipated. We could always consider letting them be eligible for the next year, but if that's a continuous issue, then maybe we don't. But, I don't know that we need to write that as a rule, but it's just something that we know.
Okay, so target or goals.
I was gonna say, maybe we soften up that other bullet by saying the applicant would potentially be ineligible.
Yeah.
Just make it,
That's a good point.
if they have a very valid argument.
Yeah, like they had a fire or something, you know what I mean? I wouldn't expect them to worry about the facade.
that's fair.
All right, so it looks like last year, and Daria, you correct me if I'm wrong on what I'm about to say. Last year, we had 5 quality or qualifying applications that were complete. So our target this year would be 8 quality applications with opportunity for approval. And that's just, we have sort of an internal goal, which is a little higher than that, but 8 quality applications. And then 50 businesses directly engaged. So that would be 50 businesses that we directly speak with, and directly identify ways that their business could benefit from the facade grant program. And then 70% of 6-round projects completed by the deadline. Are there any other goals, metrics you all feel like you would like to see? Do you feel like this isn't reasonable, needs to have more or less?
I like. How many, our budget's 25,000? So we can award up to 5. Does that percentage add up to 70%? Would it be 75%? So we're saying we want 4 or 5 this time, that doesn't, you know what I'm saying? Right, if we have 5 total applications,
There is the possibility that if there are 2 smaller projects, you could award more than 5 awards. So I think because we didn't want to get stuck in the weeds
Okay,
of
gotcha.
that, 70 seems like a good number to aim for.
that's fair. I'm making an assumption they're gonna ask for the max, but they may not. Okay, disregard.
Okay,
Let these through.
good. Okay, and then a few staff notes. We're currently working to get feedback from past applicants. Feedback is to gain the following insights: so increased sales, visits, or interest, circumstances that led to grant funding being partially used. I already touched a little bit on that. Barriers to completing projects and other informative information to help the grant program flourish. We are planning an improved marketing plan that is more detailed and definitely more involved. Testimonials from facade grant recipients is something that you all had previously expressed wanting to see. We've been talking through what that might look like. Is it some sort of short video? Is it a graphic that just has a quote on it? There are a million ways that we could go with it. We can do whatever. But we don't want to create anything until we know that we're moving forward. So, and then the last thing on the list is an update on Salem. Retta had reached out and no, Daria, sorry, I'm getting my people confused.
Someone
Sorry.
from planning.
Yeah, someone from planning. Daria reached out to Salem and has some information on their program.
Yes, so I got to speak with someone from Salem today, which is great timing. And basically gave me a rundown of their program. They have a little bit of a different process because they don't have like application season and then an award season and then a timeline for projects. They do have their awards run with the fiscal year, but they have rolling applications. So an applicant will come in saying, hey, is there facade grant money still available? They'll express how much it is, and if they match up to 50% of the property owner investment up to $5,000. So if they want $5,000, we need to invest $10,000 in the project. All of those applications will go to the Economic Development Authority, and they're the ones that will review and approve the application. Because it goes through the EDA, they can only work with for-profit businesses. So that's a restriction because of that process they have. They have 2 separate applications. So any building, for-profit building in their specified downtown district can apply, regardless of the age of the building. Any structures outside of that building, currently the restriction would have had to be a 100-year-old building, and they're proposing to knock that down to be 35 years or older. So they're working on that change this year. They also allow up to 50% match up to 5,000 per side that faces the primary street. So if it's on a corner lot, they could apply for pretty much 2 grants for each side of the building. And if they're putting in $20,000 or 10,000 and 10,000, then they could get 5,000 and 5,000 per side. I asked about how they deal with projects that don't that aren't completed within that fiscal year. And what they do is they ensure that they set aside money to be able to pay out that project, so long as it's deemed that it's still happening. They set aside money in their next fiscal year that is designated for that project when it comes into completion. So they kind of just keep it rolling and keep going with it until those projects are completed. So they don't really have many uncompleted projects of note where people have lost out. They just might take a little bit longer, but they said that a lot of their projects, whenever they come to apply, they already have a timeline in place. They already have contractors. They're just seeing if they can get awarded some extra money to go towards it, and they roll with it. That is pretty much their thing.
And then the last thing that we had as far as review, Miles is briefly gonna go over a tentative rubric that we.
Yeah, so we kind of split it up into three, I guess, different parts. So the first page is gonna be your qualifications. These are the things that people have to be considered. And then it goes into scoring, and at the end, tiebreakers, only used if there's a tie situation. So these are kind of on the first page, the qualifiers. Anything they have to have, are they located in Christiansburg? Is the building occupied or in the process of being renovated? Generally, a lot of the same requirements from the last year. And then we added number 7 for nonprofits only. The nonprofit applicant has not received any other budgeted town funds or town grants in the last year, just to kind of make sure there's no confusion there. On the scoring pages, this is where we put a lot of those other things to kind of weigh them as priority or preference instead of a disqualifier. So like, if we go down to the historical significance, there's one, if you're located in a historic district, you can get 10 points extra for being in that district. If you reflect historical styles, that's another preference that we want to, I guess, award extra points for. So this just kind of breaks down the different parts of each project and how we would score for that. And if you guys see something that you think you want to weigh heavier for, like if you want the design of the project to be worth significantly more, we can always bump those points in that category up, and vice versa if you want something to be weighed less. In terms of the planning goals section, it's the smallest section in the middle there. That's kind of a placeholder. We're going to dive into the comprehensive plan and the placemaking plan and the urban development plan, and identify which parts of those are specifically applicable here, so we can get some more detailed criteria on that. Looking into the bottom one, the age of the building, that was where we kind of took out the qualifier that it has to be a certain age, and then awarded extra points if it's older, so that the older buildings get preference or get a bit of a higher score than the newer buildings. And then on the next page, we also have an additional for-profit businesses. They get a small bump, not a big bump. And then that was kind of that highlighted section goes back to what we had talked about earlier with Randy. Do we want to preference for local businesses, small businesses? And I think if we get like a SWAM certified business, that could be something that we could put in there. So then basically all the judges would, or not judges, the selection committee would score them, add up their score, and then we would average their scores together, and that would be the base score. And then if there's few businesses within plus or minus 5 points of each other, then they go to the last page, which is the tiebreakers. And this is if they have never been awarded before in the last few years, they get 5 extra points. If they were awarded in the last few years and didn't use it, they get deducted points. So it's just a way for us to kind of make sure that's getting equal access to everybody and in a fair way.
With this, it would be within 5 years. So if it's been 2 years and they didn't use it, they're not eligible. So would we use, or update this unused past grant funds to say 5 years?
We could do that, yeah, yeah.
And then it's not necessarily, I mean, they're eligible again, but if they didn't use it before and it's coming down to a tiebreaker, consider that.
Right, and that way it's, if they still have a phenomenal project, their base score can still be like a winner. But if that comes down to them versus somebody else that has the same quality project, it goes to the person who, hasn't been awarded funds or, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah. I really like this. This is very clear. This is easy, just like, this is easy. So we just need to make sure our application gives us the information to split this correctly. But I think we can update the application and get the answers we need for this. I like it a lot.
Good, good.
Any questions on
Thanks, really good.
it? It helps us absolutely prioritize the things that are really important for this program. And it gives us, I think it'll give our viewers a chance to really like measure to something that is tangible when they're not versus just like, we feel this might be good. Not that that's what they did before, but just not knowing the process before, I feel like this will be clear for everybody.
So with that in mind, going back to our tentative timeline. My question is, next steps with the facade grant, just in general, considering council, and then what option we might be leaning toward.
I mean, do you all think option one is not pushing it?
What if we cut the first workshop in March and do 2 workshops?
I mean,
To
we
give
could-
us March
we could
to-
Still do 3 and just, and push it back.
Right.
Another month. We're already giving them more than.
Yeah.
I think we feel prepared for option one.
Okay.
I think it will be rushed, like as in, we're gonna have, I mean, I need to. I'm the first thing on the list, so I need to get it done, but. We can do it and we feel prepared to go with option one.
You could also condense the workshop instead of doing 1 per month and you had to
Well, you could, yeah.
do it a couple of weeks. You had to still do that.
I also think, and you can speak to this, but. With Miles's workload right now, it's a good time, March, April, May are a good time for something like this. It's before Launch Christiansburg. Once, you know, we get past May, he's gonna have to, you know, schedule things pretty far out. So I don't feel like the workshops are the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely doable for the
Yeah.
workshops for my part.
Yeah.
Let's say, because I mean, option one, I think is definitely desired, if and only if we can't do it well, then we shouldn't do it.
Sure.
You know,
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of that. So, I mean, but if you all feel that that truly is doable, we can pull that off, then I would take stock in it.
Sorry, do you and Retta feel the same? I don't want to speak on behalf of our group, but I do feel like our group works really well together and has done a really good job so far.
So let's go for option one. And let's just know that it's okay if we don't do a workshop in March. Let's get the workshop right. And then if we want to conduct 3, we can do them between April, May. And just squeeze a third one in there somewhere.
Could do one mid-June. Since it's getting close to the deadline.
That's true.
If it's not ready for March, then
That's a good
we can have
plan.
one mid-June.
As long as it gives, they come to the June one and it gives the artist time to do a sketch. If they come and say, yeah, I'm gonna do a sketch, as long as it gives them enough time to get the sketch done between the workshop and the deadline.
Which AI might come into play with that too now, so.
So will this need to go to council for approval before we do anything, or should I go ahead and start?
I think we should definitely share our thoughts with council. I'd like them to be totally informed about just about our way forward. What's what our proposed changes are, which I don't think there's tons of like of major changes. I think there's a couple, and there will be discussion about a couple of these. But to share the work we've been doing, provide them an update, to tell them the way forward in the timeline, and certainly get their feedback if there's improvements we can make to this. Is it a council vote on what this committee does?
Not necessarily, no, that we have been taking the applications to them.
Mhm.
Right.
But, as far as the form of the application and things, I think the committee can change the
Okay.
form of the application.
I'd love to have council's buy-in and support in this process, because eventually they will approve these applications, right, with the budget proposals, so.
Is that something you want staff to present?
Is that possible for this upcoming
That'd be
Tuesday
good.
meeting?
I think
Oh,
so.
this upcoming Tuesday.
This upcoming Tuesday looks like a pretty thick agenda right now. I was sitting here wondering if maybe the next meeting in March, which is the 25th.
Okay.
But I don't think that precludes anybody from starting to work in marketing on it. I mean, my recollection, council has not said, we're not doing this year.
Right, yeah,
We've tasked you all to come up with a different plan,
Yeah.
or with a.
just an update, yeah.
More of a plan.
So the
So-
committee is directing staff to move forward with the program as we've discussed. And we will have a brief presentation for town council with information on changes that we've made for the next town council meeting, not this Tuesday, but the one
Yeah.
after.
I'm sorry. And we do have, what's our next planned meeting? So if we present this on the 25th, we will meet one more time, right? This group is slated to meet one more time? Or not slated right now? A regular meeting.
It would be sixth.
Would it be our next meeting? Okay. Well, that would be good. Maybe we take the feedback from council on the 25th and we incorporate it on the 26th. If there's anything we want to make changes to.
We go with the regular schedule.
Okay.
On the website. and then we would-
We can schedule something, but otherwise we could just, I think we have enough here. We could probably just connect by email for the updates and form and stuff.
So send a preview of the presentation with information we could put it to you all.
And then if we want to meet, if we think it would be more beneficial, just run some more stuff. Yeah, we can get another meeting together.
Okay. All right, sounds good. Okay.
Great work.
Anything else?
I'm so happy with this, and just awesome work with all of you guys. This is awesome. So thank you so much for putting the time into this. Okay. It's 5:15. I know we have a couple more agenda items, so let's move through these as quickly as we can so we can get everybody out of here. First being business inventory updates.
Yes, so I got some information from the GIS, pulled some information from different places online, and then I still have to stop by a couple places just to verify, but I have a list of current businesses, a list of current vacancies, and a list of unshores. And they do have property owner addresses on them, but no other contact information.
Gotcha.
So that's where we're at with that.
Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, you're working on the list. Maybe we just bring that up in the next meeting and we can talk about
Okay.
when the list is updated and ready for review.
My only follow-up there, I may be misinformed on this, the regional commission, do they have similar information within their inventory? Randy, do you know the answer to
No,
that?
it wouldn't have that type.
It wouldn't?
No.
Okay, because I thought I heard something about them trying to collect that. I get misunderstood that. So I just didn't know if there was anywhere where you could supplement the information you already have, but
Okay,
if that's
I'll check
not the
into it.
case, then disregard.
Yeah, I'll check into that.
That's who I was thinking about, because I thought he had a similar project, but.
I think he was interested in anything that we could provide him. I think
Oh,
it was-
so we're-
I think all of it.
Okay. Well, then maybe there is then a way still to team up,
Mm-hmm.
because if you're all trying to get the same point, which is certainly a worthy piece of information to have, then they may be able to offer something that maybe makes our work a little easier. I'm not sure, but
Right,
it's worth an ask.
for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else on that? Okay, farmers market updates.
So the management team, there's been monthly management team meetings. We kind of started last month and that's going to continue now. Because we are working through concept drawings and details for the actual structure. We're working with engineering, to, I guess, make sure that we are, cohesive in what the plans are for the market and the structure, but also their drainage project, which has started and they're working on that. And so Hill Studio is, Mike and I are actually going to talk to Hill Studio tomorrow for working out some fine details. But they're supposed to be, working on a draft to be able to present. And the next meeting for the management team's on March 19th. And so that same day, each month, the engineering, group is also having their drainage, project meetings earlier in the day. And then we have ours so that way everything can kind of work together. There's a lot of different components to this, which we're having to work with that project and also the developer next door. We're trying to get a meeting to be able to go through some details to see if they have finalized what they're wanting to do, style forms. So, that's where we are right now. Working through a lot of things. So, I'll have monthly updates for you because we will have that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Right, anything else on that for questions? All right, passenger rail updates.
Well, the original groundbreaking ceremony was to be March 20th. It's been moved to April 24th, I think. Somewhere in there. You saw I hope you saw my email.
Yeah, I got an email from Jennifer, so.
So, I noticed they're doing some work down on, Depot Street now. I noticed the barriers are up along the line, Randy. Are they getting ready to start building a retaining wall or cleaning the bank?
They're
Or
gonna cut those
They,
trees.
they've gotta drop the trees because of the time of year restriction with bats.
Yeah, to do
so
it.
they're taking all those trees out. And
They can't grub the stumps because that's considered land disturbance, but they gotta drop the trees.
They have to take the trees out by April 1st, because that's when the season for the ice starts.
Just for general awareness for the groundbreaking ceremony, we've been in meetings for that for several months now, and they are not necessarily advertising it. So it's not a closed groundbreaking, but it's also not going to be widely advertised. So
and there's not any parking, I think.
we're working together to have parking at the aquatic center. And we're gonna have shuttles that go back and forth, but yeah, so there's a whole big plan behind it, but it is not going to be marketed and advertised, because of the size of the space and.
Wait, what did you say the date was again?
24th,
24th.
Yep.
Okay.
So
town council will be invited.
Okay.
Yeah.
the rail authority, station authority met last week. Randy and myself went over. We're on that committee. I'm the chairman of it. We finally got to meet with the architects. And it was a question and answer period about, what do you want to see? Think about this, think about that. And they showed us some pictures of passenger rail stations up the line from us, and some of them were quite quaint, some of them were a little bit too modernistic, but it ended up, he showed us 8 or 10 slides that they were able to find of the inside of the actual passenger rail station. So it was giving us, it recalled a lot of our memories of the benches and the way they were positioned. I got a better one today that I've shared with some of them. That came from a private collection, and it's the best one I've seen of any of them. But so just kind of, I think, looking at the maintenance and way building that they had over there, it looks like it's moved on quite a bit. I know it's got siding and stuff on it. Now, when they move out, I don't know. But we can't do anything, obviously, in there till they get out. But I think we will probably have I think we have availability to that building to now, don't we, to look?
I think probably say something.
Yeah, but I mean, we can, so, that's the basics of it.
So, but the designs have to conform to DHR, right? Part of historic resources, they have to like approve
Oh, yeah.
the conformities for what that ultimately will be built out to.
It is in a, to our thought right now, you know, the building, the major part of the building is gonna be doing the tracks and the platform and the canopies.
Right.
We're looking, I think we're looking to do a restore and rehabilitation type thing. I don't know. Obviously, there are a lot of upgrades that are gonna have to happen on the inside, the ADA and, you know, handicaps and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's the concept we started to think about, and we don't know, but I mean, we're not gonna tear it down and build something new. I did tell them early on, we're not building a monument to an architect. So I think they know we're gonna keep it, you know, relatively simple as far as we can. That's all I got.
No, passing you around? Okay, anything else at all? Thank you guys. Such a great effort, so I really appreciate it. All right, so if there's nothing else, then we will adjourn.
So next meeting, March 26th.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ellie from DCI, for taking out your hat today in part.
Sure, why not?
Thank you.
Answer your question about the passenger